Good. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to Yoga Berry, your yoga for scoliosis community. My name is Christine Jareggi-Berry, and I am here joined today by Abby Kraai, and she is a yoga teacher as well. She specializes, or she has spinal fusion herself, so she sees a lot of people that have spinal fusion as well. So I was really keen to talk to her today, talking about her experience, talking about her yoga journey, her scoliosis journey, and then hopefully getting a little bit about getting some tips maybe from her, what we can do with spinal fusion, and also, so she has some experience in trauma informed yoga, so this could be something really, really good for a lot of us teachers or not, maybe getting a little bit of an insight from her. So welcome, Abby, welcome. And we already had a little bit of technical problems this morning, but we are okay now. So thank you so much for your patience, Abby. You look
No
very
problem.
serene.
That's what we're
Good.
trained to do as yoga teachers.
Yes, exactly. We adapt, isn't it? We go with the flow.
Indeed.
And yes, don't take ourselves too seriously, hopefully most of the time as well. Good. So we already, sorry, you're going to have to tell all of us a little bit of that again, because Abby had already started telling me. Yes, if you can tell us a little bit about that lead up to your surgery, that time, maybe what you were kind of going through emotionally as well, because I can imagine as a teenager or preteen, and you mentioned before you were diagnosed when you were 12, but this whole journey must not have been an easy one probably for you.
Yeah. So you want me to start with the pre-surgery? Or I'll give a quick recap
Yes.
From basically from when I was 12 to 14 is when it progressed from mild to medium scoliosis to moderate scoliosis. And so, yeah, going through wearing, first going through like not really knowing what to do about it. Being told, we'll just watch, we'll just wait and see. It was like the classic treatment that they give. And so like that already was kind of disconcerting. Like doctors were supposed to know answers and were supposed to be able to give a treatment that worked. In my 12, 13, 14-year-old brain, that felt pretty upsetting that a doctor couldn't tell me what was causing it, and also couldn't tell me if it was really going to be a big deal, and also couldn't fix it. So yeah, sort of that lead up to once it became severe, more severe to, severe enough to operate on, was already pretty unsettling. And then, yeah, going through a treatment that like took so much time and effort. I was telling Christine earlier that it's called the COPES method. And I'm so curious to know, I've never met anybody who has done it. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was a sort of alternative treatment plan that involved hours and hours of exercises, chiropractic visits, wearing a brace. Also, I'm just going to say that this brace was, it was cast around your body like a regular brace was, but then they went in and they added air pockets, like air bladders, to push your spine straight. Okay. The only problem is when you're wearing a brace that has been cast to the size of your body, and then you go in and you add more things inside, it's like, where does your body go? There's no room. So it was like even more uncomfortable than a regular brace, if that's possible.
Yeah. But it sounds a little bit like the Schroth therapy as well, isn't it? I mean, the whole kind of approach, like you were saying, intense exercise and brace treatment and everything.
Totally. Yeah, which is why, initially when Schroth became a little bit more popularized, I I was both really intrigued by it and then also kind of recoiled because it's more and more I have moved away from like trying to fix my scoliosis and more into just like trying to not worry about what my spine is doing, but instead stay focused on how I feel and what I feel and how I can bring balance and like joy to my life. Like one of the things, one of the things I kept thinking about during and after that first very intense COPES treatment that I did was like, even if this works to straighten my spine, at what cost? Like, what am I gaining if yes, my spine has gotten straighter, but also I've become so stressed out that I don't even have a life. Like all I'm doing is focusing on my spine. And so like that was part of the reason I moved away from that treatment, and have moved away from most treatments or even activities that are so focused on that activity itself or so focused on a particular result because we can't actually control the result.
Mm-hmm.
We can put in a lot of effort. I'm absolutely a try hard. Like everything I do, I try really hard. But my motivations have shifted away from I'm going to try really hard so that I get this thing perfect or so that I fix this thing. And my motivation is a little bit, it's a process and it's not always, I'm not always great at it, but more and more I am more focused on, I'm trying hard because I want to do this thing and I'm enjoying the process, and I'm not so concerned with the results, which is part of the reason I love yoga so much, because it's not so goal oriented. And even if you think about the goals of like meditation, mindfulness, oneness, unity, those are goals that like I can get behind because those goals mean more to me than, oh, just straighten out your spine because spines are supposed to be straight. Yes, it's a very roundabout way of talking about scoliosis maybe, but
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I can definitely, yes. And you can kind of, because I've been running this community obviously for a few years now, and you can see people that first come into it, it's all about, I want to fix this thing. And you kind of have to go through this process of being kind of obsessed with it, and everything becomes about your scoliosis and you feel completely identified with it. That's kind of what I heard from you talking about it. But then after, and this is where yoga has helped me obviously as well personally, you kind of move beyond this. So it's, you realize that there is so much more to you, and it's, we're not just our scoliosis, obviously there's so much more going on. And and I think then once you can kind of move past this, you don't really identify so much with it anymore. Everything kind of seems to almost fall in place. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, well, what's also interesting is, having scoliosis and treating scoliosis was such a huge part of my youth, that once I got surgery, I kind of just wanted to forget about it.
How old were you when you got your surgery?
So I, 17 when I finally went through with it.
Right.
Yeah, I was 16 and chickened out right beforehand, like a week beforehand, and then a year later, it had gotten even worse, and the curves had gotten even higher. And so I finally got it when I was 17. And man, it was such a relief, like getting surgery and knowing like, oh my God, this is not going to rule my life anymore, or like trusting that it wasn't going to rule my life anymore was such a relief. And I, since then, and kind of in recent years, I've been a little frustrated with the idea that surgery is just a last resort that we should work so hard to avoid. And like, you know, people will say things like, well, of course we want to avoid surgery. And it's like, well, sure, yes, we don't want to jump to surgery as the first thing, but we also like, I think it's important to recognize that surgery is an amazing option for so many people. You know, we think about like hip replacement surgeries or knee replacement surgeries or any number of surgeries that like you don't get shamed for after you get it. Like, but then there felt like, and I've definitely encountered some yoga teachers who have said to me literally the words, "Oh, I wish you had come to me first before you got in surgery." And I'm like, no, do you know how hard I tried?
Well, yeah, exactly.
So,
Absolutely.
and it's because you don't know, you know, it's not like a hip replacement or a knee replacement where like there's potentially like, or often there's an inciting incident. There's a thing that happens like an injury or there's just like wear and tear from years and years, right? And so it's sort of like more clear when you need it. Whereas scoliosis is like, well, you're young and your curves are progressing pretty fast and we don't want them to keep progressing when you're older. So even if you don't have pain now, and even if you're not bothered by the appearance now, it'll probably increase a degree every year for the rest of your life. So like, let's operate now and try to avoid that. And so that like, it's so scary. And it involves a whole lot of trust.
Of course, and you are kind of at the mercy of the doctors there as well. And I mean, as a 17-year-old, there's only so much that you can probably contribute to it. It's your parents at the end of the day who, you know, have to kind of make this really difficult.
And my parents, I mean, my parents were amazing, and we had so many like group conversations about it, and they were definitely not, you know, no one in my family is one to just jump to surgery, which is why it's probably part of the reason that I chickened out the first time around. I was like, no, maybe I don't need it. I don't know. I'll wait and see. But there's, you know, we got to a point where we were like, yeah, we need surgery. And so to then after that hear several people, sometimes strangers, talk about like, you know, either surgery in general as being like, oh, that poor person, like they had to get surgery, or like, oh, surgery, oh, we just, you know, we do everything we can to avoid it. It's like, sure, yes, I did everything I could to avoid it too. Everything in my skill set at the time, and I decided to get surgery. And so honestly, that I think is a huge part of the reason that I had to stop focusing on approaching yoga as a way to fix scoliosis. I mean, after surgery, I didn't do yoga for probably 10 years after surgery. No, not 10 years. A number of years. Maybe 8 years. And then when I re-entered into yoga, because my first foray into yoga was when I was 15, and I was like trying everything to avoid surgery. So I approached yoga with like, oh, this will help fix my scoliosis. So anyway, so after surgery, when I came back to yoga, you know, at first I was like, I wonder how this is going to go, because I can't do any twists or back bends or side bends or round my spine. But it turns out there's still plenty of things you can do, even if, and it's not that I don't, you know, like this is my side bend now, and it still feels like something. I'm still doing something. You know, this is my twist. And it's like, things have become more mild, but they haven't disappeared. So
the first time you went back to yoga, was that just kind of a general yoga class, or were you a bit scared? Did you try and find someone who knows about spinal fusion, or how did you approach it?
I just went to a regular class with a couple of my friends, and I had, so pre all my scoliosis stuff as a teenager, I was a gymnast, which is ridiculous because now I'm 5'10". I don't know what that is in meters, but it's very tall. Like nearly 2 meters.
Yes.
So not the body of a gymnast, but But I had been a gymnast. I had some, I had a certain degree of flexibility. I had a certain amount of strength in, the weird places that gymnasts and yoga teachers and yoga practitioners have strength. So, and I was like I was quite athletic and like wasn't afraid of most physical things. Post surgery, I had continued to run and swim and play ultimate frisbee. So I didn't shy away from physical activities because they were just such a huge part of my life before surgery as well. So yeah, I just went to a regular drop-in class, and I mean, I don't remember specifically how I approached twist, but I was kind of like, well, of course I'm not going to try a wheel pose. That's ridiculous. This portion of my back doesn't move, so like that's not going to go well. So yeah, I just kind of did what I could and didn't, I guess I trusted that my body would tell me, if something hurt, I didn't push through the pain. Mm-hmm. And partially because the yoga teachers that I went to were like, if it hurts, don't push through the pain. And I was like, oh, great, good, affirmed. So yeah, I just kind of like figured out slowly like what felt good, what didn't. And then, yeah, over the years, kind of wished that I had a teacher or at least like a friend who was as into yoga as I am, who had rods, so that we could talk rods and spinal fusion. But it's not super common. So I wasn't finding really any other teachers or a whole lot of people who had had that surgery until I started teaching specifically yoga with scoliosis workshops, yoga with spinal fusion workshops, and until I started going on Instagram and like hashtagging scoliosis fusion, mm-hmm. hashtag yoga with spinal fusion, hashtag yoga with scoliosis. And that has been mind blowing. Like the number of people that I've met through Instagram who've taken my workshops because they found out about it on Instagram is crazy to me. Like I know so many more people now than I ever thought that I would with rods. Mm-hmm. And so that's been really fun because then, I can watch little snippets of their practice. I can see how their bodies are moving and know that my body would move in similar ways. And yeah, I guess it's just been sort of like a balance. I've tried to walk the balance between like not being too afraid of things, but also acknowledging and honoring when I am afraid of something and trusting that like fear is okay. Like I can be afraid to do a Pincha Mayurasana in the center of the room because I know that if I start to fall out of it, my spine is not going to arch. I'm not going to tuck and roll. Yeah. So I might blow out my shoulder instead. And so I don't do that in the center of the room. And I feel like that's okay. I'm not drawn to try a wheel pose because I fear that if I tried too hard, things would not go well. So I feel like it's okay to honor that fear, and that's the thing that I have recently.
Well, I've had
become more respectful of is that fear.
Yeah, I've had.
Sometimes it's informative.
Caroline Friedman. She's got she had 3 spinal fusion surgeries over the years. Mm. And she was telling me about her experience, actually exactly that pose, the wheel pose. Yeah. And she said, well, I was just being a bit stupid, and I thought, let's just try it. And she dropped back into wheel pose with her massive fusion, and she snapped the rod.
Yeah.
So, it is a valid fear at the end of the day.
Right. And this is a thing, like, I guess this is another thing that I think that sometimes when we practice yoga, it's common to hear teachers or yoga practitioners or just humans say like, oh, feel the fear. I mean, there's even a book, right? Feel the fear and do it anyway. Or like, is it just your fear that's holding you back? And it's like, well, sometimes, yes. And sometimes fear is good. Like fear keeps us safe. So if if you're like, oh, I don't really want to do a wheel pose because I'm afraid that one of my rods might snap, but I guess I should push through that fear. Like, no, there's no need. Don't do that. So yeah, like I feel like I'm constantly walking the line of like, what am I afraid of for good reason, and what am I afraid of because I just have never tried it? And is there a way that I could like access a part of that pose or access some of that movement without compromising the integrity of my spine, without overstressing the joints right above and right below the fusion, without overstressing the muscles that are already stressed? Yeah, it has totally changed my approach in the practice. I'm no longer thinking, how can I fix my scoliosis? How can I straighten out my curves? Like that ship has sailed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not thinking about, how do I gain flexibility in this portion of my body? That ship has sailed. So instead, it's like, how do I harmonize with this? How do I find peace with this? Not how do I change this?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. So do you have any tips for anyone who might be at the point where they've had their fusion, they've had the surgery, and they've maybe heard that yoga could be helpful, but they're not quite sure where to start, and if there is maybe, not everyone obviously has amazing body experience, or is from what I read about you, you were quite athletic generally
Yeah.
already. Yeah, is there something that they should be mindful of?
I mean, I think it's so helpful, if you can find a teacher who gives private session. I mean, I give private sessions. I'm always happy. I love having students with fusion and students with scoliosis. I think even one private session can like give you time to, and feedback. If you've never done yoga before, if you've never moved your body in that way, or even if you haven't in years, maybe you used to, but you haven't since surgery. I think it's really helpful to have somebody watch you move in a loving and kind way, not in a judgmental way, but like to say like, okay, walk towards me, walk away, raise this arm up, bend to the degree that feels good and then stop, twist to the degree that feels good and then stop, just so that another set of eyes can see how you move, and then experiment a little bit. Most of the time with my students who haven't done yoga, or who are newer to yoga, or have had spinal fusion and now are coming back to yoga, we spend a lot of the time, especially in that first session, but throughout all of our sessions, with me saying like, okay, come onto your belly and like see how it feels to take a half locust pose. Keep your feet down. Don't worry about lifting super high. See how it feels to just engage the muscles in your back and lift as high as they will let you lift. What are you feeling? And then they can say like, it feels okay in my shoulders, but it felt like kind of pinchy in my low back. And I'm like, okay, let's try something different. Like stand up, try the same thing, but standing. So there's this constant sort of, it's like a collaborative experiment where I suggest something, they try it, they tell me honestly what they're feeling, how they're feeling. And then once they go into a class again, they can have a little bit more knowledge of like, maybe I don't do cobra pose, maybe I just do half locust so that I'm not adding leverage. Maybe my fusion is like pretty long, but not all the way up to my neck. So I can still do a little bit of a cobra, but I don't want to do an up dog. Mm-hmm. So knowing alternatives to poses, I think going into class, having an idea of like, when the teacher says, from your lunge, take a twist, I know that I, instead of taking a lunge twist, can come into a modified side plank, or when the teacher says up dog, I know that I can instead come into a half locust. So I think remembering that, actually, I think you were talking a little bit about this too with Celeste, maybe last week, about like, not just saying like, well, I can't do that thing, but saying, I'm not going to do that version or that thing to that extent, but I'm going to do something else. Mm-hmm. So it becomes less about like, I can't do these things, and more about, instead of this, I do this, which is more empowering, I think.
Yes, or just saying, like,
I don't do these things.
As you say, just taking it back and saying, I'm just going to do less of the pose. I'm still doing the pose. I just do a little bit less.
Right, and I'm going to notice different things, and I'm going to I mean, yoga is so much of yoga is about like distributing the pose, distributing stress, so that no one part of our body is overly taxed or overly stressed. And so if we can do that, if we can lengthen our back bends and make them more mild, longer back bends rather than like more extreme, more compact back bends, like you're still in a back bend. You're still, and even if you're not literally like bending, you're still accessing those same elements of the pose. It's about accessing the elements rather than the shape, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on back bends and twist then for scoliosis? I know there's a bit of controversy about these.
For scoliosis, not just rods. I mean, for scoliosis, my annoying answer, but classic yoga teacher answer, is like, listen to your body. Your body will tell you. I think that if you've ever been told you should never do this, you should ask why. and you should remember that, like, just because somebody thinks that you shouldn't do something does not mean that you shouldn't. And just because somebody thinks you should do something doesn't mean you should. So, I mean, in terms of spinal structure, this is one of the things I learned from recently from the talk that you had with Meredith Weiss about the shape of scoliosis vertebrae. Like, yes, they're wedge shaped. When your spine is curved, the vertebrae get wedged to the side that you're tilting towards. That side of your vertebrae is, if this is a vertebrae and I'm tilted this way, this side is going to squish,
gets
right?
Thinner, yeah.
Yes, and this side is relatively bigger. But also in a lot of scoliotic spines, but not all, there's also a tendency to have a flattened kyphotic curve and an exaggerated lordotic curve. So instead of being rounded in this, like a normal natural kyphosis, instead of having that sort of rounding in your upper spine, we're a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us are more flat, right? So I don't have much of a curve up here. Yes, I'm fused, but even before the fusion, I didn't. And then in the lordotic curve, instead of being like pleasantly curved here, we're a little bit more like our butts stick out a little bit more. My dad used to call it a duck butt. So our whole spine is essentially in a little bit more of extension than someone without scoliosis. Of course, there are also people with scoliosis and kyphosis, as you mentioned in that interview. So it's not everyone, but it is it's pretty common that we with idiopathic scoliosis are a little bit more in extension, a little bit more in a back bend already. So if you're doing a lot of back bends, you can exacerbate that. You can exaggerate that action that's already happening. And if you don't balance it, I mean, this kind of goes with anything, right? If you do one thing in one direction and you don't balance it by going in the other direction, like that spells trouble. So if you're always doing a lot of back bends and your spine is already kind of in a back bend, you might consider doing a little bit more to balance that out, a little bit more strength in your front of core region and your side core, so that you can pull your spine a little bit out of that constant extension. So yeah, vertebrae are a little wedge shaped this way, and also for some of us who are already in extension, our vertebrae are also a little wedge shaped this way. Like the back is a little bit more short. So I mean, me personally, I have that pattern of like a flattened kyphosis and a little bit of exaggerated lordosis. So I have worked over the last last few years to bring a little bit more strength and stability to my rectus abdominis and my transversus abdominis, which it's like, how many times can we hear that we need to strengthen our transversus abdominis? A lot. We all probably need to strengthen our transversus abdominis, with the possible exception of that man that did an 8-hour plank recently. He's probably fine. So yeah, backbends, I think, are kind of like anything, like they can be great as long as we're aware and mindful when we do them. We're not just doing them to find our maximum range of motion. We're doing them to find harmony and integration of our body. And as long as we are balancing this action with a little bit of this action. And, you know, same goes for like stretching your hamstrings. If you're always stretching your hamstrings this way, you're never strengthening your hamstrings, or you're never stretching your quads or your hip flexors. Like, you're going to be it's going to lead to imbalance. So yeah, I think backbends, especially when paired with strengthening the core, particularly the front and sides of the core, can be totally fine, can be great. I would never tell anyone that they shouldn't do them. I would just say, yeah, when you do them, be mindful.
Yes.
And as far as twists, I think, again, our spines with scoliosis are tilted and also rotated. So if you have right thoracic scoliosis, your spine is moved over to the right side of your body and rotated right. If you have left lumbar, your spine is moved over to the left side of your body and rotated left. So it gets a little tricky when you have a double curve. However, the lumbar spine does not twist nearly as much as the thoracic and cervical spine. So I would say, as a general rule, we're not going to be twisting our lumbar spines much anyway. So maybe focusing a little bit more, what I tend to encourage people to do is focus more on stability down here and a little bit more mobility up here if you have it, if you don't have fusion. And to focus on derotating rather than twisting more into your rotation that already exists. So for me, and for anyone with that right thoracic curve, can you see my right rib sticking out more than my left?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and it's quite a long curve, isn't it? It's a bit
oh yeah. So my fusion is from T5 to L3.
T5 to L3, yeah, okay.
But my curve starts higher than T5. It starts probably around T1 or 2.
Yeah.
And the doctor did not fuse. He only fused to T5, I think, because it was kind of like, well, I think he was keeping the fusion as short as he could,
right.
Preserving as much mobility as he could, and still getting like a reasonable amount of correction. My curves, I think, are still, the last x-ray I had was a couple of years ago, and my curves were measured at like 40 and 42 still.
Right. Yeah.
They were 57 and 63 when I had surgery. So there was correction, and there may have been some regression since then. But not enough. So far, I'm not bothered by it. So, knock on wood.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So when your right ribs are sticking out, that is an indication that your spine is turned this
Mm-hmm.
way, towards that is sticking out. So for most folks, twisting in that direction that your spine is already twisted is going to be easier, but it's not going to be as balancing as twisting the other direction, right? Because just as if your spine is always in extension and you continue to extend and extend and extend, and you don't balance that with some rounding or some strengthening the front side, you're going to lead to more imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
So if your spine is already twisted this way and you keep twisting this way, you're going to, if you're equally twisting right and left, you're probably not going to do a whole lot of further damage. But if you're like, oh man, this side is so easy, I love twisting this side, I'm just going to stay here. I don't want to twist with the other side, it's too hard. That's probably not going to lead to good things. So I would encourage more, maybe you twist to you twist away from I keep turning around and around and around. So if I'm twisted this way, maybe I start by twisting to the direction that my spine is not already twisting.
Mm-hmm.
Spend a few breaths there, I come back. Then maybe I take one twist this direction. I don't push too hard, just a little, a nice twist. And then I come back. And then I again do this side. And that's it. So maybe you're spending a little bit more time on that side. Maybe you're doing a few more repetitions on that side. And similar to side bends, right? Like if my curve is going this way, side bending this way is going to be easier, but side bending this way is going to be a little bit more balancing. So I might go this way. Maybe I'll go this way, and then I'll come back to going this way.
Mm-hmm.
And with twists, especially, again, there's going to be more potential for rotation in our thoracic spine. There's very little potential for rotation in the lumbar spine. So I would say, rather than like worry about, ooh, but my spine goes this way in this part of my spine, or my spine is rotated this way in this part of my spine is rotated this way, so I should twist this way and this way. Maybe just worry about your thoracic and keep this stable.
Stable, yeah.
Since it's not going to twist really much anyway,
mm-hmm.
Focus on the vertebrae that can twist. Yeah. And rotate with them. And also you kind of can't go wrong with building more stability, especially in the areas that are prone to more instability, right? It's easy to lean into flexibility, but I think more and more I am valuing reasonable mobility over flexibility. Mm-hmm. For the simple fact that like my life is not going to be enhanced. The quality of my life is not going to be more because I can put my hands flat on the ground in a forward fold. But my quality of life might be enhanced if I can comfortably like tie my shoes.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there it comes also back to this is why it's such an individual practice, and it's such an we have to keep in mind that we all have different bodies and we all have different shapes at the end of the day, and what works or what is good for one person might be slightly different for another person. Totally. So I think it's really important to kind of keep an open mind, and also to trust yourself more than you probably do already. Because I always, go ahead.
Well, I think truly listening to ourselves and our bodies is such a hard thing to do. And a lot of times I have clients who I'm like, well, what are you feeling? And they're like, I don't know, nothing. I feel fine. And I'm like, well, that's not what I asked. I asked, what do you feel? Like, not how, what are you feeling? And they're like, I don't know. because we've been so trained out of that, right? Like when we're kids, of course we know what we feel because we we fall, we hit our knee, and we cry immediately. We don't worry about like, oh, am I gonna look like a sissy if I cry? Like, no, you just cry because it hurts. You know, you're hungry, and so you cry again as a child. Like there's no filter, and we spend so much of our lives like adding filter after filter, and to the point where we can't, we're not in touch with what we feel. We can't answer the question, what are you feeling, if we don't take time to actually cultivate that skill again. Yeah, so I think it sounds perhaps like a cop-out answer to say, you know, I can't tell you what to do. Your body will tell you what to do. But I really believe that that's true. But I think that sometimes, I think a lot of us need help cultivating that skill of listening again. So that's, yes, to me, the role of a yoga teacher is like, I'm here to help create situations that encourage you to listen more to yourself. I'm giving you all kinds of little cues, and like some of them are very specific and very nuanced. And that doesn't mean that they're the most important thing. It's just another way of pointing your attention to this thing so that you can observe to a more intricate or more nuanced degree, I think. Only you know your body.
Yes.
Nobody else knows what's going on in it.
Yes,
and that's
absolutely.
kind of the cornerstone of like trauma-informed teaching, is like, you got to trust that your students know themselves best. You do not know better than anyone else what they need. So you're here to support, and you're here to, you know, guide, but you're not here to be like, take my hand, I'm taking you down this path.
Yeah. So let's go into this. Let's go into this a little bit. So I mean, for me, I mean, having a big surgery like this sounds pretty traumatic. You know, obviously I haven't gone through it, but I have met a lot of people that have, and you know, I know it's life-changing. Obviously, it is trauma to your body in a way. It's trauma emotionally, psychologically. It's probably also trauma for your parents, I would imagine. And I'm a parent, and I can, you know, I can not even imagine what it would be like when, you know, my daughter is 7 now, but if she had ever had to go through any of this. So tell me a little bit about how, as a, maybe from a yoga teacher's perspective, how does that kind of come together, and what does trauma sensitive yoga actually mean? What is it?
Yeah, great question. You'll ask, you know, every person you ask will probably give you a different answer. But how I think of it is kind of what I just said, in terms of like, first and foremost, we as teachers need to know that we don't know what's best for anybody else. We have learned things about the human body. We've learned things about asana. We've learned things about yoga philosophy. We've learned things about pranayama. We've learned things about, you know, any number of aspects of yoga. And you could really extend this out to like any caregiver. Like, we've learned about our craft, but we don't know what is going on in anyone else's body, emotionally or physiologically. We can get a sense of it. We can, of course, like pick up on people's energy. We can pick up on people's mood. We can pick up on people's, you know, amount of stress that they are carrying around with them or something. You know, you can look at someone and be like, you know, as a yoga teacher, I would probably encourage that student to take a few restorative poses, so that they're not always walking around like this. But we don't necessarily, so we can make a guess, but we don't necessarily know what is best for anybody else. So remembering that, and also remembering that everyone is going to need something different. So there is no one way of teaching in a trauma sensitive way. there are things to be aware of when you're teaching in a trauma sensitive way. You know, things like, this one gets talked about all the time, right? Like touch, hands-on assist. And some people will say, oh no, never give hands-on assist in a, you know, if you're trying to be trauma sensitive, never give hands-on assist. Again, that's one of those things where I'm like, why? Why never? You know, if you're telling me to never do something, I'm going to ask you why. And the reasoning is that, well, some people are triggered by physical touch. Okay, of course, that makes total sense. Also, some people are not triggered by that. Some people who have experienced quite a lot of trauma crave human touch, right? Like I crave human touch. I love yoga assist. And if they were to just go away, I would be like, but that's a way that I feel held and cared for. I want that. So instead of just saying never give hands-on assist, so I have a very specific system which involves paperclip. And so what I say in the beginning of every class is, everyone come up and get a paperclip. So I have a little dish in the front of the room. I say, everyone come up and get a paperclip. If you are open to receiving hands-on adjustments throughout class, put the paperclip on the front right corner of your mat. If you would prefer no hands-on assist, put the paperclip on the front left corner of your mat. If you're okay with them, but you just want to be warned, if you want me to be like, I'm going to pull it and give your hips a little pull and down dog, you can put it in the middle. So right for right on, hands on, left for left alone. And then in the middle is like somewhere in the middle.
I love that.
So,
good idea.
So for me, it's like a very easy way of informing everyone that hands-on assists are a part of my practice as a yoga teacher. And sometimes people are like, what's a hands-on assist? And I'm like, oh, great question. Here's what, here are some examples. So it's a way of saying, like, putting it out up front that, like, I give hands-on assist as a teacher to those who want it. And then B, it's saying, like, if you don't want that, great. If you do want it, great. Now you know that I know your preference. So if a teacher doesn't talk about hands-on assist at the beginning of a class, there could be some people who are like, ooh, I forgot to tell the teacher I don't want hands-on assist. Oh God, I don't even know if they give hands-on assist. Like, I hope they don't sneak up and give me one when I'm not expecting it. So if you put it out in the open up front, like, this is something that I am offering, and maybe you want it and maybe you don't. And so those who want it, I'll give that to you. And those who don't, I will totally respect that. So again, that's sort of like, rather than saying no backbends, ask yourself, if you have rods in your spine, rather than say, like, I don't do backbends, you can say, when the class is doing backbends, I'm doing this. Rather than say no hands-on assist, say, when you're talking about hands-on assist, try giving a system, like, where people can opt in or opt out. So an example of, like, touch, hands-on assist, just being open about it and offering students the choice to receive or those things or to not receive those things, I think is a trauma sensitive way to approach hands-on assist. Mm-hmm. More trauma sensitive, in fact, than just saying don't give hands-on assist. Mm-hmm. And then things like, I think another really common thing in yoga or in trauma sensitive teaching is to remind your students that they have choices. So rather than saying, everyone lift your right leg. Okay, and then looking around the room being like, lift your right leg. You guys, I said lift your right leg. Hopefully nobody does that. But like, there are some teachers that are a little bit more like hawkish than others. And and it can be kind of like, oh God, okay, I guess I better lift my right leg. We don't want to scare our students into like following directions, right? We want to, I think we want to remind students like, I'm going to offer certain things throughout this practice. Remember that of course, at any point, like you are totally allowed and encouraged and celebrated if you need to do something else. And sometimes it's funny because sometimes just reminding students of that choice, sometimes reminding humans that they have choices, leads to them doing those things that they might not have otherwise tried, right? Like if your mom says like to do something, you're like, oh. If your teacher says to do something, you're like, oh, I don't want to. But if they're like, well, you don't have to do it, it's here if you want, then we're like, oh, interesting. Well, maybe I'll try it. So sometimes just that sort of gentler, more encouraging, less demanding sort of approach can lead to people actually being a little bit more adventurous, like feeling a little bit more safe to be more adventurous or more experimental, and can also calm those folks, or at least like support those folks who are not feeling it, who are just like, nope, I came here to nap, thank you. This is the only quiet that I get in my day. I am just gonna stay in a Shavasana the entire class. Don't touch me. And it's like, great, do that. Like, I don't want to disturb that. I want to support that. Yeah, so reminding students that they have choices, and also being clear with your instructions. Like, you know, I think if every single pose, you're like, you could do a down dog, or you could do a child's pose, or you could rest in Shavasana. Okay, and then if you're in a down dog, raise your right leg, or you don't have to. Like, you could also stay in a child's pose. You know, if you're doing that all the time, that gets a little tiresome and a little bit like muddled. So I think more important than the things that you say is the energy with which you say them. You know, you can tell if a teacher is like, sure, do your own thing. You can tell if they mean it, or if they're like, yes, you can do your own thing, but I'm going to be watching, you know? So remembering that words are important, but also your demeanor, the support that you exude through your energy, is perhaps more important even than the words that you use to convey the class.
Yes, absolutely. Good. I've got a final question for you. I know we've been talking already it's gone very quickly, but if you had any advice kind of for the Abby 20 years ago, or let's say, you know, you've just had your surgery, what would you tell her now if you met her?
I think I would say be gentle with yourself. And I think picturing little Abby is making me emotional. Yeah, I think being gentle with yourself, there's such a strength that comes with that. Remembering that you don't have to do everything in life or in yoga. You don't have to do everything. You can't do everything. So cool it.
Yes.
Let it be. Rest when you need rest, and be like, yes, I am resting, and this is a kind act. I think when we're gentle with our approach, we find strength that we didn't know we had. We are more patient when we, you know, can't do certain things. We approach ourselves with more love, with more care. We approach our yoga practice as an act of love rather than a thing that we've heard is good for us, and so we just power through. You know, the more things that we can do out of love, motivated by love for ourselves, for our bodies, for our communities, like if that's your motivation, you kind of can't go wrong. Because that's everything, right? Like we're not here to have perfect bodies. We're not here to have straight spines. We're here to like support each other through loving each other. And that, I think, like honestly, truly, it starts by loving yourself actively. Yeah, that's what
amazing.
I say.
I'm gonna take that quote. That's a tweetable one, isn't it?
Great. I don't have Twitter, so I'll just know that.
No,
Like
I don't know if you say Instagrammable.
Yeah, right. I like tweetable. Tweetable's cute.
Good. So, where can people find you? Where can they get in touch with you? Obviously, you've mentioned Instagram, and I will link to that obviously in the description. But how can people get in touch with you?
Instagram is Abby with the Rods, and then my website is abbywiththerods.com. My email address is, well, you can get in touch with me via email through my email or through my website. My email address is about to change, but you can always get me through the website. There's like a little contact tab, so you can email me that way. And yeah, and I send out e-newsletters occasionally. Well, right now, more frequently, like every other week because it's quarantine. So you can get on that email list if you want, and that's also on the website. And then I'm also doing a workshop, a scoliosis and spinal fusion workshop on the 6th and the 13th of June. So from, let's see, it's in Pacific time. It is from 9:30 to 11 a.m., which is 5:30 to 7 London time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a 2-day workshop. I typically do this like 2 days, an hour and a half each time. And we talk about sort of the 4 actions that I typically look at with scoliosis, and that is side bending, twisting, lengthening, and strengthening. Mm-hmm. So with those actions, like, you know, there can be some complexities with scoliosis, like we're talking about before, like, yeah, the direction you twist, the direction you side bend. So anyway, so those are the 4 elements or the 4 actions that we talk about most in that workshop. So yeah, so if you want to come to that, that's a way of getting in touch with me.
And that's via Zoom, or how is that working?
So it's through Zoom. You can also sign up through my website or through Instagram. So in my Instagram, there's a little, like a link tree, which is becoming more popular. Are you familiar with the link tree? Oh yeah, they're the best. So if you go to that little link in my bio, it'll take you to the link tree, which is just a list of links, like a table of contents. And so then there's multiple things there where you can, you can go to my website, you can go to sign up for the Scoliosis and Spinal Fusion workshop, you can sign up for the e-newsletter. So yeah, you can go to the Instagram link tree to get it all.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been really, really good. Yes, and I love how positive you are. You know, and I know you're inspiring a lot of people here. And yeah, thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you so much. I love how much you are bringing this community together. It's so inspiring as well.
Thanks
for that.